So before I get started, how many are familiar with the TEC organization? TEC stands for the Executive Committee, and just to give you a little bit of a background, but it was created in Milwaukee in 1957 by a gentleman by the name of Bob Nurse. And Bob had taken over his family business and bankrupted it in 1955 and was actually pretty depressed about that whole prospect. And you know, as they say, everybody tells you to celebrate failure, but nobody ever wants to come to the party. And Bob had a variety of CEO friends, and he met with them after the company went out of business, and they kind of processed what happened, and that became the basis of TEC. And today TEC is the largest CEO professional development organization in the world, and we have about 16,000 members throughout the world, with businesses ranging in size from about 5 employees to public companies with tens of thousands of employees. So I joined as a member when I was 31 years old, and I ended up kind of graduating as a member into the group's leader in 2008. So while Rick and Mike shared with you some very specific information, my 10 or 15 minutes is going to be a little more like a philosophy class than an instruction class, and I hope that's okay. So my intention is to share with you the sum total knowledge of everything I've learned about being in business over the last 32 years in 20 minutes, and that's probably 15 minutes more than we need, so I'll try to stretch it out. So, you know, briefly, one of the first trusted advisors that I had was an attorney from Milwaukee, and we're still great friends to this day. And he really impressed on me that for most people and most businesses, they exist for one of 3 purposes. One is to provide cash flow for the owner. Another purpose would be a legacy business. You've inherited a family business, or you've started a business, and your ultimate goal is to pass it on to the next generation, some family member. And the third is to grow a business to sell it. And one of the mistakes that business people sometimes make is they have one end game in mind, but in fact they're running their business a different way. So a good example would be, for me, for years I thought, you know, our whole purpose of having the business was to grow it and then sell it for a huge profit and retire to an island, which is a very valid purpose for a business. What I see in my work with businesses is that a lot of people have that as the goal, but they take every dime out of the company and they don't have any value in the company. Nothing's left on the balance sheet, so when it comes time to sell the business, they have no assets and their earnings are depressed by taking excessive income. That can be okay. If your purpose in owning your business is to create a job for yourself and a few people and family members, and you want to take all the cash out of the business and have nothing left at the end of the year, that's obviously you're right. This is still the United States to the best of my knowledge. But if long term you have a business that you want to grow, then the best thing you can do is to try to build value and equity in the business. This is from a TEC speaker that we had a couple years ago, and to me it's one of the most interesting slides I've ever seen. I use it in strategic planning sessions, I use it in business counseling sessions, and what this is telling us is that there are 28 million businesses, registered businesses in the United States. Now that was as of 2011, and the number is probably slightly higher than that, but let's call it 28 million for argument's sake. Of that, 96%, or around 26.75 million of them, have fewer than 10 employees and less than $1 million in revenue. And that probably represents the majority of the folks in this room. And that's terrific. That is the economic engine for the United States. It's fantastic. As businesses grow, obviously the numbers get smaller. So there's about 1 million plus businesses in the United States that have revenue between $1 million and $10 million. And I would argue that the growth, the effort that you have to go to grow between $1 million and $10 million will be the greatest effort you'll experience in growing a business. There was a terrific book called Blueprint to $1 Billion, and interviewed people from Linksys, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, a number of other people who had startup businesses, Michael Dell, that ended up over $1 billion of revenue in less than 10 years, and they would say the same thing, that each stage, and the stages are very definitive, very easy to define, but each stage was easier to get over than the one prior, okay? And so if you're interested in growing your business, just keep thinking to yourself that if I can, you know, kind of get over the next hump, if I can get over the next hump, things will get better. When we started our company, as it was a two-person operation, I was basically advertising in the classified section of the newspaper for, put ads in the paper for Oki Data dot matrix printers and Tallgrass hard drives and IBM PCs. And I would take orders and collect money with credit cards, and I would drive down to Chicago and buy all this stuff and then spend Monday and Tuesday delivering it to myself. And we grew within a 3-year period from 0 to about $10 million of revenue. Now, we thought we were smart, but it was just riding kind of the first PC wave that was coming out. But I was fortunate that I got kicked out of my third bank and still hadn't gone out of business, but my third banker that kicked me out advised me that I really needed to get a partner that had some financial sense, and since I didn't have any. And so my second business partner was a retired CPA from Pete Marwick, who's now since passed away. But he was an auditor for Pete Marwick, audited companies like Johnson Controls and the Milwaukee Country Club and all types of businesses. And he was the first exposure that I had to financial controls in business. So one of the challenges that you all have in your business, if you want to grow your business, are getting over these brick walls. And the brick walls are definitive, and they're almost universal. And the way I would describe it to you real briefly is that when you have a business that's about $1 million business, under 10 employees, relatively simple business model, you can, for all intent and purposes, run that out of a shoebox, run it out of QuickBooks by yourself, run it out of whatever system works for you. Once you start to get into having more than a handful of employees, more than a handful of customers, then you have to do something that's really awful, which is management. You just got to start to manage other people, other employees, and that will get you to another certain phase in that business. And then what will happen is you kind of run out of the horsepower of what 10 people can do, and then you have to have some systems and processes in place. And that's kind of where you get into this 10 to 25 to $50 million range. And in my opinion, if you want to grow a business and one that has value, whether it's to sell it someday or to pass on to your kids or to provide a lifestyle for you, the sweet spot for a lot of companies is to get into that $10 to $25 million revenue range of business. That'll vary based on whether you're a manufacturer, a service corporation, or whatever. And probably the most difficult thing that you're going to experience, in my view anyway, in that way, is getting into multiple levels of management. In other words, some people can manage themselves and do a terrific job, but they really can't manage anybody else. Okay. There are another group of people that they can manage themselves and they can manage a direct report and do that, or a couple direct reports, and they can do that pretty well, and those are the people that will get you to a certain level. But when you get into a more complex multi-level management where you have people managing managers, it's a whole other skill set, and that's often where businesses start to fall apart. So one of the things that, philosophies that I ascribe to is not necessarily making every one of the key people in my organization an employee. And so it's really developing a group of trusted advisors or team. Now, a lot of business owners, probably none of you in this room, have control issues where you hate to give up control, and delegation is very difficult for you because, of course, nobody on earth could possibly do your job as well as you do it. But as she points out, there are only 168 hours in the week, plus whatever you can get from your kids.